guest, Edgar Bergen. Our host, Larry Solway.
Sunday night was not the night to go to the movies, or to play cards, or to lie in bed with a good book. It was, for tens of millions, the night for Jack Benny and Fred Allen, and the biggest of them all, where you got all in one package, the music of Ray Noble, the voice of Nelson Eddy, the ribald wit of W.C. Fields, the brassy-voiced boy, Charlie McCarthy. Together, they almost have sold billions of gallons of Chase and Sanborn coffee. It all came from the quietest one of them all, Edgar Bergen. In the 20 years of weekly shows, no one ever played for a bigger audience than Edgar Bergen and Charlie McCarthy and Mortimer Snurd, and it began at least 50 years ago.
Well, I guess so. Charlie did, certainly. The radio started at 37 years. But the beginning, well, Charlie started with high school, and I was fooling with ventriloquism when I was in the 8th grade in Decatur, Michigan. Then high school is where, my senior year, I got Charlie McCarthy.
You passed out of high school on account of Charlie, didn't you?
Well, yes. My medieval and modern history teacher said remain after class. This was in about February. She said, don't plan on graduating. It was my senior year. Don't plan on graduating because you're just not doing passing work, you know. I didn't cry too much because I was already booked on Chautauqua for the summer, and that was more important than a degree. But I was having Charlie made then. I had sketched in my history book a newsboy in front of the high school building, a little Irish character. So down in May, I got Charlie, and I appeared on the high school student recital. And the faculty and the whole student body was there. This was my chance to tell them all off through Charlie. So I heckled them on, and the teacher's name was Miss Angel, of course. And Charlie says, I got Miss Angel for history. I said, that's a pretty name. He says, don't let it fool you. She grows horns at examination time. Then I worked over the principal, too. And then the next day, Miss Angel says, remain after class. And she said, I didn't know you had this talent. The world needs laughter more than it needs another history teacher. If you'll try, I'll help you graduate. That's how I got out. Then I had to go back that fall and see Mr. Brown, the principal, Square Deal Brown, after ribbing him because my grades weren't good enough to get into Northwestern. So then he says, it's a shame to keep Charlie out of college because you're stupid. so after 2 weeks of tutoring, I got my grade raised.
And that was 22, 23?
22, yeah.
That has been a long time. There are things people perhaps don't know about you. Everybody knows Edgar Bergen and Charlie McCarthy Sunday nights at 8, at least 8 Eastern time. Yeah. But they don't know about the one-reelers. The old days.
The Vitaphone shorts. Yeah. I made 12 of them for Warner Brothers, and I was playing vaudeville then, of course, and I was cautioned then, don't do your act for a Vitaphone short, a picture, or you'll be canceled off your tour, you know. So I made one for the first one of my act, but I was booked for the low circuit, and they said it wouldn't come out until late on, and I figured I would be through with the season. Well, I wasn't, and it came out up in Rochester and some other towns, and it played there a couple of weeks before I got there, or the week before. And instead of being fired, they advertised Edgar Bergen in person. Well, that boomerang, so it was a very nice break.
But there you were, playing the old vaudeville circuit with Charlie. And was Mortimer around then?
No, he didn't come for 10 years after.
But all the time you tried to break into what was the only, I guess, national big time was radio after about 1930.
Yeah.
And you banged and banged and banged.
And, yes, I was playing Shapery and doing very well at a club in Chicago. I went over to the NBC station, and the man in charge there said, I auditioned for him, and he says, no, it won't go, they won't believe it, and your comedy isn't right, it isn't good.
The business of not believing it today, people will say to me, oh, you're going to talk to Edgar Bergen. Don't tell me people would want a ventriloquist on radio. The whole effect is gone.
That's right.
So it's really gone full circle. That was the original objection too, was it?
And when I did get booked on Rudy Valley's show, the head of the agency in charge of radio programming, he says, we booked a ventriloquist on Valley's show. he says, a ventriloquist. Well, he damn well better be funny. And he was there to see that I was.
You were funny.
Yeah, and it came off, yes, yeah.
There were funny people around you, too, in the heyday of the radio show. All the really great people. W.C. Fields just stands out, perhaps above everybody else. Does he stand out above everybody else for you?
Well, he does for me in radio, because he sent me a wire from the sanitarium when he first heard me on radio, complimenting me on the comedy and the timing. So when we came to the West Coast to open up the big show, it was just natural that we'd invite him on, and that was the beginning of a lovable feud.
I got to stop. You said he sent you a wire from the sanitarium.
Yes.
He was in a sanitarium.
Yes,
Was he drying out, or?
Well, I don't know. It might have been little cirrhosis of the liver, I don't know. But he did drink, and he came to rehearsal with a thermos of martini, and the show, too. But he never showed any signs of it, and had no use for a man who couldn't carry his liquor.
He was kind, though, you told me, and I'm surprised, because all the stories we hear about Bill Fields were that he didn't like kids and took it out on Charlie.
Yes, yes. Well,
is that fair?
I know that. It was his character. He was, as Charlie called him once, the softest hard-boiled egg he ever met. Well, the thing is, it was his character to be a kind of a grumpy, disagreeable man, and I liked, he lived the part, I think. But of course he looked out for himself too. We were always careful to have an equal balance. I didn't want to lose a great partner like that, so we'd have feuds. But then he did like dirtying up the script, you know. We would say, this is it, and then we'd both sneak in little toppers, and he enjoyed that, and we got to ad-libbing, and we got into trouble a couple of times, but we got out of it all.
You wrote the stuff, the two of you would generate this material yourselves. You didn't have a battery of writers.
No. In those days, we had to find writers and develop them. They were just not around, you know. A writer in those days wrote a Broadway show, or he wrote a vaudeville act and then sat back and collected 10% on it. And they just couldn't see writing an act every week. And so, well, it just was amazing. I found out how much you could do if you have a deadline. And so it worked out. I'd go over to Bill Fields' house, and we would write Monday morning and talk about next week's show. We would talk and write, and then he would write jokes, and I would write jokes, and then we had an agency man. Then we'd put them all together, and worked out very well.
You always had a baritone on the show.
Yes.
Jack Benny always had tenors. And Kenny Baker and Dennis Day. But you had baritones.
Yes, well...
Nelson Eddy in his heyday, I guess.
Yes. Yes, he was. And Dorothy Lamour, right from the sarong,
Giving Charlie a chance to make the kind of lewd or suggestive comments that he'd make in the whistle.
Yeah.
And the little giggle.
Yes. Well, of course, he was always a ladies' man, but we figured he was only 11 years old, so it was harmless. It was all talk, you know.
Was it you getting out through Charlie? That Edgar Bergen was never considered to be a dirty old man or a dirty young man or any of those things, but you did it through Charlie, didn't you?
Yes, I guess. Well, to think in the early days what we couldn't say on television or on radio, well, they're saying it so much more now, you know, on television and, everything in pictures, of course.
But Charlie was a lecher.
Well, he was a nasty little kid. I mean, he liked to see how far he could bluff. Telling the truth is a coward's way out. It takes some talent to tell a lie and get away with it. That's his explanation anyway.
There's an old cliche that the ventriloquist is taken over by the alter ego. I get the feeling that you use Charlie to let things out of you.
Yes, I wish I could walk into a room with people and make a hit with them and be as welcome as Charlie. With Charlie, it was always better. So, like somebody has to
throw the hat in the door,
or someone have to use a cigar as their gimmick or some other thing. But Charlie was a great help. And the embarrassing thing is when I played some parts in pictures, you know, such as with Irene Dunn and I Remember Mama, I worked for less money when I worked without Charlie.
And you were allowed to be Swedish then?
Yeah, I was a Norwegian undertaker, and Charlie said they couldn't find they had to get a Swede. They couldn't find a Norwegian dumb enough to play the part. Well,
the naked Edgar Bergen, sitting here with me, without Charlie McCarthy, but very much alive and awfully warm. We'll come back to you right after this. This is to be with Edgar Bergen. We talked a little bit about you using Charlie as a way to get into things, but I got the feeling that maybe Charlie stood between you and the realization of the things you want to do. You got married very late, and it was a surprise to people. It wasn't until 1945.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
As if radio was going to come to an end, and...
Well, no, of course I was working. I would do my show on Sunday, and Monday morning I would have a meeting on next week's show, and then working on a picture at the same time. There was no time to develop a romance, really, and in my vaudeville days, I never saw a married couple in show business, even leaving the wife at home or being together 24 hours a day. It wasn't a good example for a married man.
Had you seen the kind of chaos of Hollywood marriages, whether that's a fiction or not?
Yeah. I think it was that I was a bachelor at heart, really. I think that was as much as anything.
We were all pretty surprised, I guess, those of us in the audience that hear this holdout, this man who's now well into his 30s.
Yeah.
Is still not married.
I was in my early 40s.
Yeah. Well, I didn't want to say that.
Well, that's all right. I can't lie about that sort of thing. And some very good friends of mine said, well, I'll give it 3 years. So I figured that's about as long as I would last in the marriage. But, well, we're going on what? We're going on 29. We're 29 years now. So, and one marriage for each of us living in Hollywood. It, just never got around to getting a divorce.
You surprised everybody, too, because she was, and I'm sure still is, a tremendously beautiful woman.
Yes, she is, and she's a very fine mother, a very fine housekeeper, and a good tennis player, and she's very important to my life, and so we have lots of fun.
You managed, I guess, with her beauty and your brains, or whatever, to produce somebody who is consummately beautiful. I don't know if we can see this properly.
Yes, I took.
Isn't that a beautiful little girl?
She was, I guess, about 5 years old. I took that picture over there. I was a photographer and amateur.
How does she feel, do you think? I'd better tell the audience that this is Candace Bergen.
Oh, yes.
I think I'd better just tell them that. How does she feel, do you think, about you showing it? It's at least not on a bare rug.
Oh, no. I've got a picture of her as a little baby changing her diapers on film, taken. But I don't think maybe she'd care too much for that all. Yeah, we just got a phone call this morning. She's in Africa now.
Yes, I wanted to ask you about that. This photographic safari and going in among the Maasai, and terribly adventurous. Were you that?
Yeah. Well, that was some time ago. Now she's there to interview Mrs. Goodall and with the chimpanzees.
Yes.
And she will be there now. She should just get there now. After a week there, then she goes to Spain and starts another picture.
So I'm talking also to an audience who knows you as Candace Bergen's father. How does that make you feel?
Yes. Well, for years I was known as Charlie McCarthy's father. Now I'm known as Candy Bergen's father. I just can't seem to make it on my own. But I'm satisfied with it.
What do you think there was about the kind of background you must have given her to make her, beautiful she is, but as talented, as adventurous, as resourceful, apparently, as she is?
Well, she doesn't get her beauty from me, and as she grew up in show business, everybody she knew was in show business here, and so she wanted to be different, to do something out of show business, but they caught up with her anyway. And of course, I got to mention, I have a son that's 12 years old. He'll soon be 13, but he's also just great. He's now out with the Rams he's a ball boy to pick up things and all that, and he's living it up, and he loves athletics. He beats me at golf and beats his mother at tennis. That's very bad.
I want to look too while we're looking at pictures, some of these old things. Now, this one, I presume we talked before about the Vitaphone stuff, and I presume this is one of them. Can we show this?
Well, that's where I'm dressed up as a hobo and a tramp character. You see, I was tired of doing Charlie, always teaming up with Charlie and playing vaudeville, so I wanted to get in pictures, and that was a tramp character I had in mind. And I even made a film test, and I took it to Hollywood, and they let me take it back home again.
Comics, traditionally, it's almost a joke, want to play Hamlet.
Yeah.
And the guys who do Hamlet, I suppose, want to be comics.
Yeah.
Did you feel you wanted to escape? You said you want to do something without Charlie.
Yeah.
Did you want to escape from the burden of having to be funny and going on and on the way you did?
Well, I really got the message once when I went to the funeral of a pal of mine, a flying friend that I knew at the airport there. He spun in, and I found the funeral service very, very relaxing and very pleasant, and a great change from comedy. So I said, maybe it's time to ease up.
You mentioned flying. I've got another thing here, which and you, one of your hobbies. Can we show this thing? This is
yeah, that was my first plane. I've had 7 of them, and I'm in my parachute, and Charlie's in his bumbershoot.
You love to fly, but you don't fly anymore.
No, I grounded myself, and with my doctor's help, and so about 2 or 3 years ago, and I had 30 years of it. So I had a wonderful.
You
time.
still have time for other hobbies. Yeah. I want to show these. These I'll show 2 of them in succession.
Yeah.
You're a steam freak.
Yes, that's right. I had a 1910 white steam car, and I paid $250 for it 20 years ago and sold it back to the same man for $7,500, and it's the dumbest deal. I'm trying to buy it back for $10,000.
There's a model steam engine. This.
That's Walt Disney there. Yeah, and that's Walt by the engine, and James Melton on the other side. And there's Candy as a little girl there, and
we don't remember, I guess, who the other little girl was.
Yes, the other one is Dick Powell's little girl. Dick Powell was there, but he's not in that picture.
And this looks almost like one of these farm machines.
Yes,
An enormous big steamer. Is that a thrashing machine?
That's a case thrashing engine, and I have it. I still have that, yes. And I will turn it over to the museum. We have a steam club here in Griffith Park, and I'll probably make a donation of that a little later on to them.
Lear of the Learjet had a big notion about a steam car, and he seems to. Has he gone under with that thing, or is it still going to be?
Well, I was through his factory, and I know Bill Lear, and what he started out was to produce a steam car and with low pollution, and he got that in beautiful, clean burning car. And then it became a fuel shortage. Well, he couldn't get a car to operate on less fuel, apparently, than the gasoline car. So that slowed him down on that count. But I suppose it will. You have to have a boiler and an engine. While with a gasoline, it's all one unit. And
would you like to be driving a steam car down
down
Sunset Boulevard or along the freeway?
Oh, I had a Stanley before I got this white, and back in the early 40s, I drove down Hollywood Boulevard in my Stanley steamer, and it was hissing, and I drove up next to a lady. She had an old Oberlin, and it was really an old car. And I said, "My, that's an old car you got there." I was setting it up for her, say, "Well, look at that junk you're driving." And she says, "Yes, it is old, but it just runs beautifully." So she didn't get the point, but I told her how old my car was. It was 1918.
James Melton was a big steam man, too.
Yes, he was.
Yes. Yeah. He really was. People remember him as a tenor, but it seems to me that people like you and Melton, your hobbies are even more important than what you do. That's where your head really is. Is that
David
fair?
Rose has the finest collection of miniature steam engines here in the valley. I had a steamboat. I had a 28-foot Monterey that I converted to steam at Newport Beach, and we have character boat parades. And I licensed as the SS Poop-Along.
We're going to poop along. We'll be back right after this. without Charlie McCarthy, but never really without Charlie McCarthy. Would his comedy be dated today if you bring it back just as it was?
Well, I think comedy is very durable. Good comedy it just doesn't date like songs and dances and things. I can do routines that I did 30 years ago, and I often pick up an old routine and do it, and for personal appearances, and it goes just as well as anything I can write today. No, I think. Well, I can tell jokes that are 3,000 years old. I know a few of them, and they're not too bad. So they're very durable. And if there's any change in comedy, I think we've gotten a little more brittle. Of course, I was one of the early insult people, but I always...
But you used Charlie. Charlie always insulted.
And I always tried, if he got away with anything or was wrong, I had to punish him,
If you trotted out a Mortimer Snerd today, kind of stupid, a hick, a hayseed, would you get letters from farm groups saying, we're not like that at all?
Well, no, Mortimer Snerd is giving Charlie a real run for his money. I close my shows with Mortimer Snerd now, and I think we all have stupid people in all professions, and he's not necessarily a farmer, I guess, but he is stupid.
Who's funny today? Who's funny today?
Well, I think for original creative stuff, Jonathan Winters has a style all his own, and he's very difficult to steal from because it's so individual. I enjoyed the Sonny and Cher show and the Carol Burnett show. I like the fact that they used comedy costumes. I get tired of comedians coming out in tuxedos, And
but you did that. You were all.
No, I came out in white tie and tail.
But radio was verbal, right? And here you must have missed the sight gags. When you see Carol Burnett today, it is a tremendous amount of sight.
Which I must interrupt and say, when Fred Allen was going to work with Charlie, he was out of work, and he was going to team up with Charlie. And he says, well, we'll work it out. We think that we can do it. And he says, oh, thank you, Mr. McCarthy. I kissed the hem of your tuxedo. Charlie says, it's a tailcoat. He says, in that case, I'll blow you a kiss. Well, we got away with that on radio in those days. And in vaudeville days, you couldn't say hell or damn. An act would be canceled immediately.
There were so many more things I wanted to talk to you about because I know the things you were involved in. The Edgar Bergen who cares about youth, who's involved with American life. And now there isn't enough time. Do you ever get the feeling, just tell me briefly, that there isn't enough time to do all the things you want to do, not just in this half-hour context?
Yeah, well, there are a lot of things that I want to do, but sometimes I don't have the energy and to follow through on some of these things. But I've been sort of just sitting back and looking, but I have some ideas now.
I'd love to hear them, maybe another time.
Yes.
Thank you.
This program is brought to you from Hollywood. Larry Solway's guest was Edgar Bergen. The Larry Solway Show is a Columbia Pictures Television Canada production.